All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started here. We have a lot to cover. It's going to be a little bit like trying to take a sip from the fire hydrant. I've done my best to pare it down and only give you the most important points. But there's a lot of good information that we're going to cover. It's probably going to be about 2 hours. We'll take a break about halfway through, give you some time. What? 2 hours. There's a lot of stuff. I know, that's why we got to get going. There's no time to waste. All right, hopefully we'll go quicker, but we'll see. All right, let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for this chance we have to come and to learn more about you and actually the bodies you've given us and the health that you want for us to enjoy. Be with us now. Help us to learn and to grow. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. So we're going to look today at a new approach to weight loss. Begin by sharing just a little bit about my story, my experience. Just about a year ago exactly, this was me at the Santa Cruz Boardwalk with the 8th graders. And I remember I wanted to take a picture of myself. I don't like taking pictures of myself, but I figured I'll document this nice day. And it was just increasingly difficult to find a decent angle that didn't make me look like I was 700 pounds. And that was the best I could get. And I realized that was, something, I had known up to that point. It's not like I just woke up and realized I needed to lose weight. But, I realized at that point that was a pretty significant thing that I really needed to start doing something about. At that point, I was going to the gym probably 5 days a week. I was working, I ate fairly well. It wasn't like I was eating fried food all the time and, hated vegetables and, living with a vegan, it's at least half my meals were decently healthy, right? And so it was frustrating to me to know that I was doing kind of what the world tells you to do, pretty much modern doctors' advice, exercise, eat vegetables, and I was doing the best I thought was out there. More, maybe not the best. I knew I could do better, but it was just frustrating to me to know that here I was going to the gym a lot, working really hard, and eating fairly healthy, at least comparatively speaking, and still getting larger and larger by the minute almost. So when I came home from Santa Cruz, fairly recently, soon thereafter, I began to look for some things to help with weight loss. And as I was doing some research, I came across this documentary called Eat Fast and Live Longer. Those of you that come in, you should have a resource sheet or a sheet there that has some room for notes, but along with some resources. And this it's indicated on there. You can find it for free on YouTube or Vimeo. Just Google Eat Fast and Live Longer. And this documentary is about an hour long, and it covered about 4 different approaches to weight loss. And it really got me thinking about the man in the light pink shirt there. He works for the BBC. He's actually a doctor himself, and he went and was exploring these 4 different approaches to weight loss, and they all had to center around fasting. The first one that they went to was someone from USC. Fast 4 days a month, and it really resets your whole body chemistry. Those of you, if you're, maybe on the verge of diabetes or have other high cholesterol, triglycerides, you'll see all your levels drop with doing a 4-day fast once a month. He said, well, that was difficult for him, so he went on to look for some other options, and he came across this lady, Dr. Krista Verde. We'll talk a little bit more about her later. And then he ended up with a 5-2 diet. And we'll explain more of that as we go along. But this was kind of a window into health and into a different approach that I had never really heard of before. And so if you want to take an hour, it'll kind of give you a good basic overview of some of the things, but we're going to be digging a little bit deeper based on what I've learned from that starting point. As I said, I came across Dr. Krista Verde in this documentary, did a little bit more research about her. She's a researcher out of the University of Chicago, and she promotes, and one of her books is on your resource list. It's called the Every Other Day Diet, or alternate day fasting. And this was very influential to me. Then I came across Dr. Jason Fung. Dr. Jason Fung, he is kind of the top of his field, and the doctor is kind of leading this push about intermittent fasting that we're going to be digging into here. Pretty much all of the material we're going to cover comes from Dr. Jason Fung. And he's not just a doctor that you might, think he got his doctorate in some medical school out in some third world country that's kind of, types up stuff in his mom's basement, a quack, in other words. He's not. He did his fellowship at UCLA. His specialty is nephrology. He's very highly respected in his field, and he currently runs a weight loss and diabetes clinic out of Toronto. And the wait list for it is years long. So very, very knowledgeable, very and highly respected in his field. So through all of this, through fasting, I lost 70 pounds in 7 months. And I didn't want to and people along the way had been asking me questions, and and this being new and still want to figure it out, I wanted to wait a while and not just lose the weight, because there's a lot of diets out there, you lose the weight and you gain it right back. And we're going to actually talk about that. And so I've been able to maintain and actually lose a little bit more in the next 5 months. And so it's been about a year, almost to the date, since I started this fasting experience. And so that's why I wanted to come here today and share this story with you, because it works. And it doesn't just work for me. Along the way, we found a lot of other benefits for fasting. We won't get into all of it because we're already pressed for time, but we found that fasting benefits people for their memories. They're starting to find that research is showing that fasting is a benefit for people dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, or helps prevent that. They're not sure why exactly, but they're starting to see that it has something to do with your brain chemistry. They found that fasting helps people with joint issues, with autoimmune diseases. And so talked with Crystal and, my wife, and so, she obviously doesn't need to lose weight, but, some of the other health benefits, she tried it, and, it was helpful for her, and, she lost weight along the way, so it helps, that worked for her. Some other people in church have been, I don't want to share their names because it might be personal, but, they've shared that they've lost weight. Someone came up to me yesterday at church and said, I would share with people kind of in a nutshell, and so they kind of implemented this, and they say they've lost 30 pounds already. So this is not just something that works for me. This can work for everybody, really. And that's what Dr. Jason Fung finds. He says everyone that comes to my clinic to lose weight loses weight. And he also reverses diabetes in basically everyone as well. So it's a approach that works whether you want to lose 5 pounds, 50 pounds. He said the weight that he's lost from a patient in his clinic, I think, was 150 pounds. So this is a very effective approach. But when you hear fasting, it sounds weird, especially if you try to keep up with modern approaches to weight loss and health. And there's a lot of myths out there with fasting. We're going to look at them towards the end, but some of them are starvation mode. Have any of you heard of starvation mode? Fasting will put you in starvation mode. Another myth is that it's going to overwhelm you with hunger, that you won't be able to control yourself, and you're just going to start stuffing your face with Krispy Kreme donuts. Fasting causes overeating when you do resume, so you skip a meal here, but you eat 3 times more there, so it makes it worse in the long run. Fasting makes you lose muscle. It's kind of related to starvation mode. Fasting deprives the body of nutrients. Fasting causes hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar or low blood glucose. The brain needs glucose to function, and it's just plain crazy. These are some of the myths that hopefully we'll combat through this presentation. So, does this story sound familiar to any of you? You find a diet, maybe a fad diet, or maybe a traditional diet. Maybe it's juicing. I did a juice diet for a while too, several years ago. and you follow this diet, and it seems to be going well in the short term. Maybe you did an Atkins diet for a while, or whatever you might have done, and you're like, oh, this is good. I've lost a few pounds. I'm feeling good, and then all of a sudden you stop losing the weight, right? And then you stop losing the weight, so you try to be more intensive about your diet. So you do it even more to a stronger. You start cutting out even more carbs. You start eating less food, or you start exercising even more, and then you find that you lose weight a little bit, but then it stops again, and so you keep piling this more and more intensity on yourself and more stress on yourself, and then finally it breaks. And you're like, I can't do this anymore. I can't exercise 25 hours a day because there's only 24 in the hours in a day. I can't not eat nothing forever, and so you just break, and then all of a sudden the weight comes back, and not just all the weight you've lost, but a little bit more. Does that sound familiar? And you just think, what is going on here? And you just get angry at the scale and take the hammer out and smash it, right? I'm done. So one of the most common approaches to dieting is reducing your calories, right? That's the most common thing you do. You're like, all right, I need to lose weight, so I am going to eat less calories. Calorie reduction as primary means of weight loss. As Dr. Fung calls it, it's crap. And we'll see why. So calories in and calories, we're going to look at 4 assumptions here, I think, 4 or 5. Calories in and calories out are independent. They think one has no issue, no impact on the other. And so this is actually false. See, rather than the simple balancing scale of calories in, calories out, it appears that our body acts much more like a thermostat. That is, the body seems to have a certain body set weight. Anyone have a certain weight that you just hit constantly? You might gain a little bit from there, you might lose a little from there, but your body just seems to naturally gravitate towards a certain pound. That's a body set weight. Any attempts to increase above this will result in our body trying to return the body to its original weight by increasing the TE, or total energy expenditure, or increasing metabolism to burn off the excess calories. Any attempts to decrease below your body set weight will result in our body trying to return the body to its original weight by decreasing your total energy expenditure. No wonder it's so hard to keep the weight off. As we slow our metabolism, we must further and further reduce our caloric intake to maintain weight loss. Does it make sense so far? You have a body set weight, your body wants, naturally you gain a little weight, your body wants to bring it back down, you lose a little weight, your body wants to bring it back up. And so it's a thermostat. That's how it functions, because they're very closely related. And it makes sense if you think of it kind of just generally. Say a 7-pound man that weighs 300 pounds is going to need to consume a lot more calories than a woman that's 5 foot, 110 pounds, right? And so the bigger you are, the more calories you need. And so when you lose weight, you get smaller, and so you need less calories. And so there's a pretty clear connection, an obvious connection if you think about it, between the calories in and calories out. Another assumption is that there's a conscious control of calories in. Hunger is merely an inconvenience and plays no part in weight homeostasis. This is an assumption that we think, that those feelings of hunger, it's just, I just need to conquer those feelings of hunger. And that has no part in anything else. It is the conscious brain that makes the decision to eat or not eat based on calories. Conscious control of calories in, it's an assumption. There's other things going on in our bodies that control our ability or the amount of calories that we consume. Continuing, there are numerous interacting hormonal systems that tell our body when we are hungry and when we are not. Not a medical person, so I don't know how to pronounce all of those, but these are all hormones: leptin, ghrelin, peptide YY. They're the most obvious examples of hormones involved in hunger and satiety. I think that's right. The feeling of being satiated. Clearly, it is not merely the brain's decision to eat or not, but it's a complex hormonal balance. And we're going to be digging into this a little further. Another assumption is that we have a conscious control of calories out. We control how much exercise we do, and we assume that everything else is stable. We think, all right, so I'm in control of how many calories I burn. So every other day is going to be a certain level, and so I can control through exercise how much calories I burn. Again, this is a false assumption. This makes the assumption that exercise consumes a major proportion of our daily energy needs. We often assume that diet and exercise means that diet and exercise are 50-50 partners in weight management. In reality, it's 95-5. It's Batman and Robin. They're not equal partners. There's a major superhero and a minor sidekick here, and we'll dig in a little further later. Conscious control of calories out continues. Consider that a person who does no exercise at all still requires almost 2,000 calories a day. If you've ever looked at a calorie counter on a treadmill, you may have noticed that after about 45 minutes of a brisk walk, the amount of calories burned is usually something on the order of 150 to 200 calories. In other words, it's not even 10% of our daily caloric needs. The other 90% is what we should concentrate on. Most of our daily energy expenditure is used for generation of body heat and other metabolic house cleaning. That makes sense, right? If you've ever gone on a treadmill or ever kind of try to manually calculate the calories you've burned through exercise, you're like, man, I did all this work, for only 200 calories. I could have just skipped, a couple bites of candy bar and that would have been the same thing. So it's really not equal. The imbalance is huge between diet versus exercise. Fat stores are essentially unregulated, another assumption that many of us make. If you consider any system in the body, it is a regulated system. For instance, growth and height is regulated by growth hormone, blood sugars are regulated by insulin and glucagon, among others. Your gender is regulated by testosterone and estrogen. Thyroid is regulated by thyroid-stimulating hormone or free thyroxine. Fat stores, again, another continuous assumption. We are discovering new hormonal pathways in the regulation of fat growth all the time. Leptin is one pathway, and you can see cortisol and, of course, insulin. Because a lot of people think, fat just kind of stores itself, whereas all the other systems in the body we know are regulated by systems. There's a plan in place. There's hormones that regulate pretty much everything else in our bodies, and yet we think, it's just a matter of calories in, calories out, that nothing really is going on that regulates our fat. When in reality, we're finding that there's a complex system of hormones that do regulate our fat. So calorie, if you're late, CRAP stands for caloric restriction as primary. The main way people think of losing weight is by restricting or lowering the amount of calories they take. But in this model, eating causes obesity. Eating too much causes obesity. And that's kind of the general assumption that many of us make, right? We see a fat person, that person just eats too much. We gain a little weight, we think, it's just because I'm eating too much. Therefore, from a scientific standpoint, we can easily test this hypothesis that eating less will reduce obesity, right? Makes sense. I need to lose weight, so I'm going to eat less. I'm going to consume fewer calories. But again, that's crap. When we eat less, these are things that happen to us. Calories are needed to heat the body. So the body turns down the body heat. Result, patients feel cold no matter how much they try to put on clothes. Have you found that to be true? When you're dieting, you're restricting your calories, you tend to get colder more easily because your body is turning down the thermostat. Another thing that happens is calories are needed to pump the heart, so the body slows that down. Result is the heart rate decreases. And if you've ever kept track of your heart, monitor your heart rate, you're going to find when you restrict your calories, your heart rate goes down. Calories are needed to maintain blood pressure, so the body turns that down. Result, the blood pressure decreases. Calories needed to think. Brain is very metabolically active, so the body turns down that. Result is inability to concentrate. If you've had a lot of calories taken out of your diet, you find that it's hard to focus, right? Because your brain is kind of going a little haywire. Calories are needed to move, so your body turns that down. Result is weakness during physical activity. Again, you feel a lot weaker. Is this news to anybody that's ever tried to reduce your calories? I don't think so. I think we all have experienced this. So when we eat less, what happens is our metabolism shuts down. And so this it's a cascading effect through our entire body, through our system. So the rule of thumb that many of you have probably heard is that if you reduce your caloric intake by 500 calories a week, you'll lose 1 pound. Have any of you heard that before? Yes, a few hands gone up. So there's a limit to that, though, because if you think that if you start off at 200 pounds and you're losing a pound a week, if you just reduce your calories by 500, after 200 weeks, are you going to weigh 0 pounds? No, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's clear that at some point the body has to reduce caloric expenditure. Your body's not going to continue to burn the same rate of calories if you keep reducing the calories that is available to it. It turns out that the adaptation happens almost immediately and persists in the long term. Your body realizes that I'm not getting the amount of calories that I'm used to burning, so I'm going to stop burning that amount of calories, and then it kind of stays there. Even if you start eating the calories, the normal amount of calories back, your body has reduced the amount of calories that it's burning. The dirty secret of most dietary studies is that as weight is lost, both fat and muscle weight are decreased. But when weight is regained, most of it is fat. That was my experience when I lost weight doing juice fasting, doing the juice cleanse or whatever. Comes back, you lose. A lot of the diets say their goal is to lose a 2-to-1 ratio, lose 2 pounds of fat for 1 pound of muscle. And that's considered good. But when you gain the weight back, it comes not back in a 2-to-1 ratio, it comes back as almost a 3-to-0 ratio. And so you've lost muscle and gained just a lot of fat in return. So, kind of a review. Think about it in dietary terms. When you go on a calorie-restricted, high-carb, low-fat diet of, say, 1,560 calories a day, just like your doctor tells you to, you feel lousy, tired, cold, hungry, irritable, and depressed. That's not just because you are dieting. There are physiologic reasons why you feel so crappy. Metabolic rate drops. Hormones make you feel hungry. Body temperature drops. And there are a multitude of psychological effects. The worst thing is that you lose a bit of weight, but you regain it all back when the diet stops. Again, pretty common experience for anyone that's gone on a diet where you simply tried to reduce your calories. And this kind of leads, and not kind of, it leads to guilt. We feel we have failed ourselves, right? When weight comes back and we realize that the weight is actually just fat and not even muscle, we think that is our fault. Our doctors, dietitians, and other medical professionals silently criticize us for failing. Others silently think that we have no willpower and offer meaningless platitudes. But in truth, the failing was not ours. The portion-controlled diet is virtually guaranteed to fail. It has been proven over and over in the last 100 years. The only reason we think it works is because everybody, the doctors, the dietitians, the scientists, the media, has convinced us that it is all about calories. Feel a little bit better after failing a diet? That there's other things going on in our bodies, and it's not just the fact that you have less willpower. In fact, through this research, people have made the point that skinny people that are naturally skinny, the people that can just chug down soda and eat pizza and candy bars all day and never gain a pound, those people have exerted just a fraction of the willpower that most overweight people have, because they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to try to diet. They don't have to, and so if you're looking for people that have a lot of willpower, it's usually the people that are trying to lose weight, the heavier people, because they have to exert it, and they try and they try and they try. But it's not necessarily just their failing, it's not, or hardly at all, just a failure of willpower. So hormones. We're going to look at hormones here for a moment. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Ghrelin. This hormone basically makes us hungry. Patients are more hungry over the initial weight loss phase, but even after 62 weeks, there is a significant increase in the hormone Ghrelin. What does that mean? It means that they felt more hungry, and the hunger never leaves. So when you're dieting, your body ramps up the production of this hormone to make you feel hungry. And then even when you stop dieting, the increase in that hormone lasts for over a year. And so it continues. And so even though you've put the weight back on, you feel hungry. You're going to still feel constantly hungry because of the production of this hormone. Peptide YY. This is, a hormone that connects to your feelings of being satiated, being that feeling of satisfaction when you're eat. Okay, you've been full without being satisfied before, right? I'm not the only one. So it's connected to peptide YY. And it's released in response to protein and fat. Again, over the initial weight loss phase, peptide YY was lowered, but even after 62 weeks, peptide YY are significantly reduced. What does that mean? It means that in response to a standard meal, the subjects felt less full, and that feeling never leaves us. So you're feeling hungry, and when you do eat, you stuff your face, and you still don't feel full, so you stuff your face more because you still have that feeling of hunger, and it's just this cycle that's based off of these hormones. So does it come down to a lack of willpower? As you can see, it has nothing to do with a lack of willpower or any kind of moral failure. It is simply a hormonal fact of life. We feel hungry, cold, tired, and depressed. These are all real, measurable physical effects of calorie restriction. This, then, is the vicious cycle of undereating. That's what it is. You lose weight, and you feel better, but those hormones start kicking in, and you eat some more, but you're still not satisfied, and you gain the weight back, but those hormones are still, and it's all started because you went through that period of undereating, of trying to restrict your calories, a constant restriction of calories. Women's Health Initiative study. This was a massive, expensive, and ambitious National Institute for Health study published in 2006. It also set the bar for awesomeness. This is Dr. Jason Fung talking. Close to 50,000 women were recruited for this randomized controlled trial. This is the absolute gold standard in experimental medicine, and this study is probably one of the most important studies of its kind. And it studied 50,000 women, and they found there's a control group that had basically no changes, and the test group where they reduced calories by 361 calories per day for 7.5 years. So a substantial reduction of calories per day for a substantial length of time. And increasing exercise by 14%. So they reduced calories, increased exercise, and it did not result in any more weight loss than doing nothing. So these women that were increasing exercise, reducing their calories, lost no less weight than the women in the control group that weren't doing anything. In fact, they didn't just not lose weight, they were actually fatter than before. At the end of the trial, they had actually gained weight compared to their starting point after reducing calories and increasing exercise. That's the stuff that wants to make you pull your hair out, right? Then there was another study, a Vermont state prison study, and we're not going to look at all the studies because there are tons of studies. But so you might see something where I just make a blanket statement or refer to a study. There is science behind it. I'm just not making it up, and Dr. Fung's just not making it up. He's well researched, tons of footnotes. But for sake of time, we're just going to look at these kind of two studies mainly, or briefly. Dr. Ethan Sims in the late 1960s wanted to study overeating. So they had that women's study that studied undereating and exercise. In the 60s, he wanted to see what happens if you just ate a whole bunch. Some people were made, and what better place to run? It was a little maybe violation of ethics perhaps, but he got these prisoners in Vermont and fed them upwards of 10,000 calories per day. 10,000 calories a day, that's 4 times or more, maybe 5 times more than most people are recommended to eat. One man only gained 10 pounds with all of that. Maybe he's one of those genetically blessed individuals, right? Most people did gain upwards of 20% of their body weight, and that's a significant weight gain. But if you're eating 5 times the amount of calories you're supposed to be eating, you don't gain 5 times your weight, though. It's only a 20% weight gain. What happened to the energy expenditure? Metabolism, or total energy expenditure, increased by 50%. So your body, is getting overwhelmed with these calories, but it doesn't just take them and just continue to store fat and fat and fat. It ramps up the energy expenditure because it tries to want you to keep that body set weight. Your body is doing its best to keep you at a decent level. So even these prisoners that were getting fed 10,000 calories a day, their metabolism skyrocketed because this is how our bodies work. And it makes sense how God created us. So we find as we've gone through this calories or caloric reduction as primary, the normal, we think that personal choice or behavior leads us to eat too much and exercise too little, and so that leads us to obesity. And we find that that's false. All along, both of those statements they're not connected. There's no link that it's all our fault, that it's our willpower that causes us to eat too much or exercise too little, because these studies are showing that that's actually not what leads to obesity. A quote from Dr. Fung, he says, "Let me state it as plainly as I can. Eating too much does not cause obesity. Exercising too little does not cause obesity. Therefore, eating less and moving more will not cure obesity. It is proven, accepted." So body set, weight, and hormones. Any questions so far? Fairly clear? All right, well, and we have some time, hopefully, at the end for further questions. And if there's something unclear, don't hesitate to ask. So body set, weight, and hormones. Endocrine glands are controlled by substances called hormones. We kind of talked about this earlier. Thyroid stimulates hormone, a growth hormone controls the growth of cells. Sex hormones controls sexual maturation. So there's a hormonal signal from the body that controls fat mass. And this is the hormonal obesity theory, or HOT. Fat mass should also be under hormonal control. I mean, it makes sense if hormones are controlling everything else. The major stimulus to gain fat cells, obesity, is likely insulin. To a lesser extent, cortisol plays a role. Hormones are the signal for the body to become obese. Therefore, under this signal, we undertake behaviors to become obese. That is, we eat more or exercise less or decrease total energy expenditure. So the hormones, so we think it's our fault for eating too much or being too lazy to exercise, when in reality it's being triggered by these hormones that want us to we're getting flooded with insulin, which tells your body, all right, you need to get fat. So your body's like, all right, we can do this. We're going to eat more and we're going to exercise less. And so it's not the cause, but it's the result. Advantages to this hormone obesity theory. First, the fat cells, like other systems in the body, are under hormonal control. That is, not simply up to our conscious brain to decide whether to eat or not, but under automatic control. This takes into account both hunger and basal metabolic rate. The BMR is the amount of calories that you're going to burn if you were just in a coma, basically. If you never got out of bed, never had a single thought or function, if you were just in a coma, that's the amount of calories you're going to be burning. A second advantage is that this means that calories in and calories out are inextricably linked to each other. They will work together to either increase or decrease obesity based on the hormonal signals. As we have seen, caloric intake and expenditure are tightly synchronized. This matches up with what we found, right? That there's a connection between the two. So the million-dollar question is this. If insulin causes obesity, then will giving someone insulin cause weight gain? Anyone have any clues to what the answer is? Do we have any diabetics in the crowd, perhaps? The answer is a resounding yes. In fact, almost any physician who prescribes insulin to patients with type 1 or type 2 diabetes already knows this to be a fact. And patients taking insulin are also more than well aware of this. You take insulin and you gain weight. It's just happens. It's a fact of nature, as we said earlier. A 1998 study found that those who took more insulin gained an extra 10.5 pounds on average compared to those that took less insulin. So the study on diabetics, gave some just enough to control their blood sugars, gave some a lot of insulin to really keep a tight control on their blood sugars, and they found that those that were given the extra insulin gained weight. Anyone that takes insulin is going to end up gaining weight. Insulin causes obesity. The more insulin you give, the more obesity you get. And what? Yeah, and that's what he sees in his clinic. That he said he got one patient that that came in taking, I think, 400 units of insulin, and the doctors were happy because they had her blood sugars under control. And because start off with a little bit and you add a little bit more and you gain weight, and so that impacts your diabetes, and so they give you more insulin and you gain more weight. It's just a vicious cycle. So body set weight and insulin. Insulin is the hormonal signal to the body to increase weight. That's what triggers that body set weight point, because they're getting those triggers from the hormone insulin. If insulin is increased, we increase our body set weight. In order to reach this new higher weight, we will need to eat more or decrease total energy expenditure. So the insulin makes us fat. In order to get fat, we will eat more or reduce our TEE. The behavior of eating more is in response to the hormonal signal to get fat. Again, our actions are based on the hormone insulin. Insulin, and just to back this up, they did some studies on diabetics that were taking different kinds of treatment. And they found insulin and glyburide, which raises insulin levels, both increased weight in diabetics. But metformin, which is a pill, treats the blood sugar, but that does not raise insulin levels. And they found it does not raise weight in diabetics. And so they found that it's insulin that is the main factor here. So eating more and moving less is the result. Clear statement, is the result of obesity, not the cause of obesity. And so we've had it backwards. Most of us have had it backwards in our minds the whole time. If we eat less and move more, we're going to lose weight, because that's the cause, that's the root of our obesity. But we're finding it's the result, not the cause. So exercise, that's the other component, right? Eat less, and we have to move. We have to exercise, and that's key. It's 50-50. But as we mentioned earlier, not necessarily. Calories out. The calories out is more accurately termed as total energy expenditure, TEE, which consists of our basal metabolic rate, which is, remember, the amount of calories you're going to burn in a coma, plus voluntary expenditure, exercise. So your total energy that you're going to spend through that day is just the energy that your body uses just to stay alive, plus the energy you burn through exercise. So is exercise needed? Whether physical activity increases or decreases, there is virtually no relationship to the prevalence of obesity. There is simply no measurable reduction in obesity from the increased exercise. It just does not matter. Higher levels of physical activity did not reduce obesity. And they found several studies. This is a graph of a study they did in the UK, obesity versus exercise in UK men from 1998 to 2006, an 8-year study. And you can see on that as the more obese people are, the more they exercise. There's no correlation. There's no reduction. You would think the graph would be the inverse. The higher the exercise, the lower the weight would be. But it's actually the inverse of that. Because there's several theories, but they feel it's because overweight people want to lose weight, and so they're out there exercising more. They're trying to do their best to burn it off. But that's not what's working. That's not really helping cure obesity at all. And we kind of see that in America, right? I haven't been alive that long, but from reading, they said in the 70s, that's kind of when the exercise boom started, and you started seeing gyms and more fitness and becoming more a centerpiece in American culture. But has America gotten slimmer since then? No. We've continued to grow and grow and grow in our obesity rate as exercise has become more and more important. You would think that America would have become a much healthier country in those preceding 40 plus years. And it's due to compensation. One of the dirty little secrets of the calories in, calories out crowd is that as you increase exercise, caloric intake tends to increase. So one study showed for every extra hour of exercise, it was a children's study, that the kids ate an extra 292 calories. And actually there are many, many studies that show the same effect. They don't call it working up an appetite for nothing, right? So you go to the gym, you're lifting weights, you're on the treadmill, or you're running, you're training for that marathon, and you're hungry when you come home. And so some people that are just doing it for exercise, they're hungry, and they kind of say, well, I've earned that ice cream bar, right? I've done that, and so I deserve a little treat. And then even those that are training seriously, that are doing it to really increase their health, they still feel hungry, and so they compensate because their body is sending these signals for hunger, and so they eat, even though it might not be ice cream. They still try to eat healthy, but they're still consuming more calories because they're burning more energy. It's that thermostat principle again. You burn more calories, and your body wants to compensate, and people do compensate. And Dr. Jason Fung says, here's the bottom line. There is no measurable association between obesity and physical activity. I'm not saying exercise is not good for you. It just doesn't work that well for weight loss. Again, to be clear, there are a variety, a long list of benefits from exercising. It helps your body in tremendous ways, just not for losing weight. I mean, a little bit, but it is a 95 to 5% ratio. It's not equal by any means. Again, health helps you in a variety of other ways, but it's not good. If you're trying to lose weight simply by exercising, it's not going to work. Insulin and obesity. Insulin causes obesity. I mean, that's what we've seen. Once we accept the fact that insulin causes obesity, then we will want to know what caused that increased insulin levels that caused obesity in the first place, right? We want to get to the root of the problem. If we're finding that it's that increase in that hormone, insulin, we want to see why that hormone is increasing in our bodies, which is causing us to get fat. And the most obvious candidate is the fattening carbohydrates. Because these carbohydrates are highly refined, they tend to raise blood sugars and blood insulin levels quickly. This will tend to cause weight gain and obesity. The carbohydrate insulin hypothesis is not so much wrong as incomplete. The notion that carbohydrates are the only driver of insulin is incorrect. And there's a whole other section again on carbohydrates and how they're metabolized, and really don't have time to get into it. But just in a nutshell, what this information here says is that it's the refined carbohydrates that cause the spike in our blood sugar, that cause the insulin to be produced. And there's more to it than that. That's what that last bullet point is. It's not just carbohydrates. There's more to it than that. It's not the only driver of increased insulin, but as it is the primary factor of the refined, simple carbohydrates. Like refined white flour, sugar, table sugar, all of that stuff. That's what causes your blood sugar to spike, and it increases insulin production in your body. And so this is the kind of the normal flow of things. You eat food, you increase your insulin in your body, and every food is going to cause your body to increase insulin production. Whether it's broccoli or it's a scoop of chocolate ice cream. It's just the matter of the levels of insulin that's produced and the rate at which it's produced. And so that increased insulin stores sugar in your liver and produces fat in the liver. This is a pretty good analogy to help kind of understand what's going on here. So if you compare energy, glycogen, fat, with money, your wallet, and your bank. So when you eat food, your blood produces insulin, and then that insulin takes those calories and places it turns it into glycogen, which is stored in your liver. And then once that once that storage is full of glycogen that's in your liver, then it starts placing fat, around your body. To put fat in your liver, maybe visceral fat around your organs, then starts putting, subcutaneous fat around your body, and because that glycogen store is full. And so when you compare that with money, wallet, and your bank, glycogen is the source of energy, right? That's your short-term source of energy. Just like your wallet is your short-term source of money. Like you want to go and you need to go buy, fill up your gas tank and pretend there's no credit cards, right? So you're reaching to your wallet and you're going to pay them cash, right? But then you need to go and you have enough for them, but then you need to go buy groceries. And so you reach into your wallet and buy groceries, and then you pay, and pretty soon your wallet's empty, right? So how do you refill your wallet? You go to the bank. You don't have as much, you carry your wallet with you everywhere, right? It's easy access. But the bank, it takes time, it takes effort to go to the bank to get money. Same thing with energy when it comes to glycogen and fat. Energy, when you need energy to go, run around the block, your body's taking energy out of that glycogen that's stored in your liver. Once, and when you go around the block, then you have to, say you work as a construction worker and you're out working all day, and then you come home and you have to walk your dog, and so your body's been withdrawing energy from your liver through glycogen. But once that store is depleted, then that's when it starts taking energy from your fat. The thing is, we don't like our glycogen stores to get empty. So it's when every time we eat, it starts to refill those glycogen stores. Just like we don't like to go to the bank every day, right? So we take a lot of money out maybe and store some at home. So we replenish our wallet as frequently as we can without having to go to the bank, because that's an extra hassle, it's an extra headache. And so that's kind of, do you see the analogy there? That glycogen, when we need energy, that's the easily accessible energy, but we like to replace that. And so we never get to burning the fat because we burn our glycogen and we eat, and we refill our glycogen, and we burn it and we eat, and we refill our glycogen, never accessing all of that energy that's stored as fat. And insulin and obesity. So the reverse is also true. So when you don't eat, you're not eating food, you're fasting, that decreases insulin. And so when that insulin is decreased in your body, that encourages the stored sugar in your liver to be burned, as well as it burns the fat in your liver and your body. So when your glycogen is burned out, then you start to lose weight because you're not eating, you're not replenishing it with food. So here's a traditional meal cycle. I'm kind of getting closer to the point here, I guess, that many of you want. You're like, just tell me how to lose weight, Pastor. What are you giving me all this nonsense for? We're getting there. I want to give you a good foundation, right? Is this helpful? Is this interesting so far? Hopefully. All right. So traditional meal cycle. Say even if you talk to your mom, what would she say? Have a good breakfast, have a good lunch, have a good dinner, no snacks, right? You're going to ruin your meal, and then that's it. The only time you would eat were those 3 times a day. And so you would eat at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that's when your insulin would spike because you're eating. And then between meals, you would have decreased insulin because you're not eating, no snacks. And then when you go to sleep, you're obviously not eating when you sleep, unless you're a sleep eater, I guess. But so you have a long period, at least 6 to 8 hours, maybe more, of fasting when you sleep. And so you can see the insulin increase in green and the insulin decrease in blue. That was kind of how most people ate for decades, if not centuries. This is the modern meal cycle. You have breakfast, right? That's the most important meal of the day, but you're on the rush, and so you're grabbing a donut or a muffin, those big fat 1,000-calorie muffins from Costco, and then you go out the door because you ate your breakfast because you need it, right? Quote, need it. And then in the middle of the morning, you need a mid-morning snack, so you go to Starbucks maybe, and with a coffee and sugar and cream, or maybe there's some, donuts at your office or whatever, and you have that mid-morning snack. Then it's lunchtime, and you go and have your lunch, and then the mid-afternoons, kind of energy crash comes, and so you drink an energy drink, or you have that, maybe there's a birthday party at work, and there's a birthday cake, and so you eat that at lunch or that mid-afternoon snack, then you come home and you eat dinner. That whole time, your body has been producing insulin because you've been eating constantly throughout the day. So then you go to bed after dinner, or you try to go to bed, but then you realize, I need a midnight snack. And you get up and you go raid the fridge and make yourself a little sandwich or something. And so your blood sugar spikes up in the middle of the night because of that midnight snack, and you go back to bed. So instead of having a lot of blue on this graph, you have a tremendous amount of green and hardly any blue, right? Your body is producing a lot more insulin than it used to. Because if you've listened to kind of modern nutritional advice, is you want to avoid starvation mode, right? And you avoid by starvation mode by never getting hungry. So you eat a lot of smaller meals. Don't eat 3 big meals, eat 6 smaller meals. Or have your snack, have a substantial snack in between so your body doesn't go into starvation mode. Again, we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit more, but that's false because what that's doing is the opposite. I remember the first time I heard it, someone said, eat more to lose weight. And immediately that was like, what? That's crazy. And then I heard them and I didn't know anything, so that makes sense. But that first initial reaction of eating more to lose weight, that doesn't make sense if you haven't heard any of the explanation before, because that explanation is wrong. That first gut reaction to eat more to lose weight really makes no sense because you're eating more, producing more insulin, triggering your body to gain weight and not burn it. 1970s versus today, there is the balance. Fed time versus fasting time. Today, it's way out of whack. Fed time is way more than our fasting time. So insulin resistance, having obesity for a long time should make no difference in terms of being able to lose weight or not. But anyone who has tried to lose weight or has known someone trying to lose weight knows that the duration of obesity plays a very large role. If you've only been overweight for a year, you're going to have a lot easier time losing that weight than if you've been overweight for a decade, right? Anyone has had that from experience or know someone that's had that issue? When the longer you've been overweight, the harder it is to lose the weight. And it's because of insulin resistance. What does that mean? If we can accept that insulin causes weight gain, then why do high insulin levels over long periods of time tend to make it difficult to lower the insulin levels so that we can lose weight? Something is clearly missing. The missing something is insulin resistance. This is a picture of what insulin resistance looks like. To the left, there's the normal insulin metabolism, where insulin will take the glucose from the bloodstream, funnel it in nice and tight and funnel it into the cell. And then you see the bottom there. That's the normal intracellular glucose. There's not a lot of glucose just hanging out and flying all over the place. It gets funneled to where it needs to be. Insulin resistance, on the other hand, the insulin is not as capable to funnel the glucose into the cell like it should. And so the glucose is just overwhelming the insulin, and not as much glucose is getting into the cell like it needs to be. Because though there's been so much insulin in your body, being overweight, and having those constant insulin spikes, that the insulin is not able to function as effectively as it should. And so through those years of being overweight, you've built up an intolerance or a resistance to insulin. Does that make sense? It's kind of like drugs, right? What I've heard and what I've known, not from experience, but you start off with a little cocaine, and you want to get that same amount of high, but you get used to it, and so you need more cocaine to get that same high, and you need more cocaine to get that same high. Same thing with insulin. You've been flooded with insulin because of your eating habits, and so then the insulin becomes more ineffective, and so you need more insulin to be as effective, and then that becomes ineffective, so your body produces more insulin, and again, it's that cycle. And that leads to insulin resistance. And that's why it becomes harder for people that have been overweight longer, because they've built up that tolerance to insulin. So this is kind of a flow chart of how things work. There'll be a little bit more in-depth one or intense one later, but these fattening carbohydrates lead to an increased insulin level, right? Refined carbohydrates, sugars, white flour, spike your insulin level. And that also, insulin resistance leads to a spiked insulin level because you need more insulin. So even if you eat broccoli, as an overweight person eating broccoli might produce as much insulin as a thin person eating a piece of candy. Because even though the requirements for insulin is not the same, because of being overweight, your insulin has become so ineffective that your body needs to produce more, even just to deal with something healthy like broccoli. And so insulin resistance leads to an increased insulin level. And it's that increased insulin level that leads to obesity, that resets the body weight thermostat, and then that is what leads to eating too much or exercising too little. Does that make sense? Kind of? We're on the same, at least you're following. All right, insulin resistance, continuing, it says when a drug, what I just said, in effect the body becomes resistant to the effects of cocaine with prolonged usage. In other words, drugs cause drug resistance. And insulin causes insulin resistance. The fat get fatter. But the reason is not that they are eating more or exercising less than the skinny people. The point is that their insulin is driven largely by resistance and not their diet. They are not lazy. They are not gluttons. They have a hormonal imbalance that needs to be addressed. Maternal obesity leads to childhood obesity. Childhood obesity leads to adult obesity. Long-term obesity makes it harder to diet and lose weight. These are all consequences of the time-dependent effects. Did you know that in the past few years, there has been a tremendous spike in babies, infants, there's the right word, overweight infants between 0 and 6 months. Babies and are getting obese. And that's because the mothers are obese. And in the breast milk are transmitting the high amounts of insulin to the babies. And babies, are no one's going to be forcing extra food down a baby's mouth, right? Some babies are more hungrier than others, but what we think of a traditional obese person is someone that just eats a lot of food and doesn't exercise. But babies are babies. They're going to eat and they're not going to exercise. And so there's really a lot of non-negotiable factors that impact their weight. And yet these babies are becoming obese, not on their fault of their own, but because of the insulin that they're being exposed to through their mothers in vitro and through their mother's breast milk. So this leads to something called diabesity. Because diabetes and obesity are so closely linked, it has so many of the same root problems or root causes. Dr. Fung calls this diabesity. These fattening carbohydrates lead to increased insulin level, which leads to diabetes, which leads back to more increased insulin, which leads to obesity. These two are very closely connected. Here's an interesting point, that 70% of the tendency to obesity is genetic. Now, some of us might, think kind of makes sense, right? You can kind of see overweight parents have overweight kids, and skinnier parents have skinnier kids. And there is a genetic link in here. And it's the sensitivity of the brain to insulin determines this. Exercise, for instance, will increase the sensitivity of muscles to insulin, but has no effect on insulin sensitivity to the liver or brain. So liver, brain, and muscles, those are what's sensitive to insulin. But it's the brain sensitivity to insulin that's key. When you eat carbohydrates and the liver gains fat, we develop insulin resistance in the liver, but that doesn't affect the other two. The effect of insulin on the brain is to increase the body set weight, which causes you to gain fat. So it's when your brain is sensitive to insulin, that's what triggers everything else. That's what, makes the pounds start sticking. It turns out that insulin is a growth factor and tends to increase the risk of cancer as well. Again, it's another connection they've started to uncover. And again, the genetic, that 70% tendency to obesity is genetic. That's kind of good news for some of us, right? Like, man, I can blame the genes for that. But really, it's not what it's talking about is the sensitivity to insulin. That's what's passed down from person to from parent to child. Is that sensitivity to insulin, which causes the weight gain. So that's what the genetic factor is. It's not necessarily you're fat because your mom was fat. You're sensitive to insulin because your mom was sensitive to insulin. So diabetes, we're going to touch briefly on diabetes. So American Diabetes Association, this is a direct quote from them. It says, "For most people, type 2 diabetes is a progressive disease. When first diagnosed, many people with type 2 diabetes can keep their blood glucose at a healthy level with oral medications. But over time, the body gradually produces less and less of its own insulin, and eventually oral medications may not be enough to keep blood glucose levels normal. Using insulin to get blood glucose levels to a healthy level is a good thing, not a bad one." This is what the American Diabetes Association says, that it's basically an incurable disease that starts off with oral medication, and it's going to progress to insulin, and that's okay, that taking insulin is a good thing. Dr. Fung responds kind of incredulously. This is a quote, "Using insulin is good? Really? Are we in bizarro world where good is bad and bad is good? The use of insulin means that the insulin resistance is extremely severe and is a very, very bad thing. People who take insulin are extremely high risk of cancer, heart disease, and stroke. But here's the ADA saying that it's a good thing. Either they think we are retarded or they are retarded. We have had tremendous success, in talking about his own clinic, had tremendous success reversing type 2 diabetes in our intensive dietary management program. We apply the same principles that we outline here for the treatment of obesity to type 2 diabetes, since they are two sides of the same coin. And I know some of you have asked about type 1 diabetes, and he does, on his website, on the resource sheet, he does talk about type 1 diabetes, and there is a doctor that has done some research and has some really promising results on himself. He's a type 1 diabetic. So I encourage you to go to his website and search for that, but we don't have time really to get into type 1 diabetes here. So Dr. Fung is saying, you're missing the point. You don't treat cocaine addicts by giving them more cocaine. That just makes matters worse. He said you're just getting it all wrong here. You want to reduce the sensitivity to insulin. So here's a more nuanced flow chart that we've seen. He's added, you can see at the beginning there, animal protein leads to increased insulin level. They're finding more and more that, people went on the Atkins diet, and they just started stuffing their faces with protein. They found that excess protein, gets metabolized by the body in the same way that carbohydrates do. And so excess protein, especially animal protein, actually raises your insulin levels, the way it's metabolized. And then we'll talk about fiber here in a moment. So what to eat? There's two parts of the question, right? And this is the question that most people spend their time on. This is what most research is done on. This is what most diet fads are about, is what to eat. And this is it. 3 things. How to lose weight, restrict added sugars. The first thing is what you want to do is, those are the, and then reduce refined grains. Those are the simple carbohydrates, right? So you want to reduce the added sugars because that causes your insulin to spike. You want to reduce refined grains. That causes your insulin to spike. And you want to add fiber because adding fiber, if you eat, not saying that you should, but if you make a milkshake and you dump a whole bunch of fiber, husks into it, it's going to be better for you because it's going to delay the glucose being released in your bloodstream, which is going to delay the insulin, so your body's not going to need as much insulin as quickly. It's going to still need insulin, but it's not going to spike. So fiber is a guard against insulin spiking in your body. Again, don't go home and make yourself a milkshake and fill it with fiber, saying that's what I took from this lecture. It's not the thing to do. So if you want to lose weight, this is all we're really going to talk about because you can, for time's sake, and you can find plenty more in-depth, but the basics are this. Restrict added sugars. Again, this is basic. And if you think about it, one of the points that Dr. Fung makes is, if you asked your grandma way back when how to lose weight, what are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you to stop eating sweets and lay off the starches, right? And that's what they found. It depends on what on actually what your needs are, but in reality, the salty crackers are not going to cause your insulin to spike, if you're trying to break this insulin, sensitivity issue. Salty crackers obviously are not going to be good for you because, again, it's processed foods and, refined stuff. But, if you're trying to decide between, whatever, Snickers bar or, I don't know, Doritos, maybe go with Doritos. I'm not, again, not the best of either worlds, but restrict added sugars. This is what your grandparents knew, and this is before anyone knew what a calorie was, right? It's only in the past few decades that we even understand what calories are and have based our diet around calories. Back, before then, it was just, made common sense. And this is what it was. And also add fiber because it helps regulate the blood blood glucose, and your need for insulin to spike. So the history of fasting, because this is kind of what this is about. The title of this was A New Approach to Weight Loss, right? But this is a not so new approach, actually. That's why new has always been in quotation marks. Hippocrates wrote, way back in ancient Greece, to eat when you are sick is to feed your illness. The ancient Greek writer and historian Plutarch, around 46 to 120 AD, also echoed these sentiments. He wrote, instead of using medicine, better fast today. Ancient Greek thinkers like Plato and his student Aristotle were also staunch supporters of fasting. And it's not just the ancient Greeks that continued on throughout history. Philip Paracelsus. All right, there you go. The founder of toxicology and one of the three fathers of modern Western medicine, along with Hippocrates and Ghrelin, wrote that fasting is the greatest remedy, the physician within. Benjamin Franklin, coming a little bit more into modern history, one of America's founding fathers and renowned for wide knowledge in many areas, once wrote of fasting, the best of all medicines is resting and fasting. Fasting for spiritual purposes is widely practiced and remains part of virtually every major religion in the world. Jesus Christ, Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad all shared a common belief in the power of fasting. And this is, coming from this doctor doesn't make a big deal about it, but he's, atheist. He doesn't, he talks about evolution and all of that. He's an evolutionary biologist perspective. But he says, look, the major religions have gotten it right, incorporating fasting into their spiritual lives, because they understand there's a benefit, a spiritual benefit perhaps, but definitely a physical benefit to fasting. So who would you trust? He says, he has this picture. This person that believes in evolution says, who would you trust? Jesus or the Colonel when it comes to your health? Stages of fasting. So here we've talked about, with that analogy might have been the wrong spot, but the analogy of the wallet and the bank. We're going to look at when we eat and we stop eating, the going from a fed state to a fasting state, there's 5 stages. The first stage is the feeding stage. During meals, insulin levels are raised. This allows uptake of glucose into tissues such as muscle or brain to be used directly for energy. Excess glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver. So you eat, immediately you feel better, right? Your body has that energy. It's almost instantaneous. Your brain has been cloudy. It gets sharp and you're ready to go. You have more energy. And after your brain's been fed, your muscles have been fed, then that excess glucose gets stored as glycogen in your liver, which is what we've talked about. The second stage is the post-absorptive phase, which happens 6 to 24 hours after beginning fasting. So when you stop eating, 6 to 24 hours later, insulin levels start to fall. Breakdown of glycogen releases glucose for energy. Glycogen stores last for roughly 24 hours. So you stop eating, in 6 to 24 hours, that stored energy in that wallet, remember, starts to being spent. Your body starts breaking down that stored glycogen in your liver, so your body continues to have energy to move, to function, to think. And those glycogen stores, your wallet, has enough money to last for 24 hours. So gluconeogenesis, that's the third phase, happens in 24 hours to 2 days. The liver manufactures new glucose from amino acids in a process called gluconeogenesis. Literally, this is translated as making new glucose. In non-diabetic persons, glucose levels fall but stay within the normal range. So the glucose, your body spins it up. It made new glucose from the glycogen, and now that's all been used up. But now amino acids start making new glucose to feed your body to give you energy. And so your blood glucose will go down a little bit, but it's still normal. Then the fourth stage, 2 to 3 days after beginning fasting, you go into ketosis. The low levels of insulin reached during fasting stimulate lipolysis, the breakdown of fat or energy. So your body has completely switched now. And ketosis is your body running off of fat. In basic words, your body has made that switch from running off of glucose, running off of the glycogen. Your amino acids have run out of new glycogen, and now your body has transitioned and has gone to the bank, remember? And starts making withdrawals from the bank to pay for its energy bills. The fifth stage, or the final stage, is the protein conservation phase. So after 5 days of fasting, high levels of growth hormone maintain muscle mass and lean tissues. Increased norepinephrine or adrenaline levels prevent the decrease in a metabolic rate. So after 5 days, people think, especially with that starvation mode, well, after you miss a meal, you're going into starvation mode. After 5 days, you're going to be dead, right? This makes no sense. And, he talks about it from an evolutionary standpoint, but, from a creation standpoint as well. God knew what he was doing when he created our bodies, right? And back, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, or even past, after then, there wasn't a 7-Eleven on every corner, right? You had to, even in the perfection of the Garden of Eden, you still had to plant and sow and harvest, and, so there were going to be times where food wasn't, there was no Snickers bar right in your pocket. And so, and especially afterwards, when sin entered the world and we had to, when everything wasn't perfect in the garden, it makes sense that go through winter time, through the seasons. Food is not going to be as plentiful in winter as it is in spring, right, or at harvest. And so the body works accordingly. And so if you went without a meal for a day and your body just shut down, you started losing energy and you had no way to, if you didn't have food for a day and your body had no way to get energy, you would just kind of sit down and lay down and then die because, kind of like a battery, your cell phone running out of battery without a charger, right? But God says, no, that's not how I created you. It's after 5 days even, what's going to happen is the human growth hormone is going to kick in and it's going to prevent muscle loss. So again, this is the exact opposite of starvation mode, where it says, your body's going to, if you don't eat, your body's going to start burning protein. It's going to start eating up your muscle, which makes no sense. Your body has stored all of this energy as fat. Why would your body start eating muscle instead? And the growth hormone comes in to prevent that. And then in fact, it boosts up your adrenaline level, so that you have the energy, because you're hungry, it's been 5 days since you've eaten, so you have the energy, the boost of energy to go out and to search for food and to, get the food that you need. Does that make sense, those 5 stages? All right, so fasting is the most efficient and consistent strategy to decrease insulin levels. Does that make sense? If insulin is caused by eating, fasting, not eating, is the quickest, most effective, efficient way to break that insulin from being produced, stop that insulin from being produced in your body. Blood glucose levels remain normal as the body begins to switch over to burning fat for energy. This effect is seen with fasting periods as short as 24 to 36 hours. Longer duration fasts reduce insulin even more dramatically. And this is the missing puzzle piece: regular fasting. So many of us are caught up with what to eat and have missed the other component, which is when to eat. Because everything you're eating, whether it's healthy or not healthy, produces insulin. And it's that insulin that it causes, as we've seen, causes the weight gain. And so it's that fasting, the regular fasting, is that missing piece of the puzzle. Most diets reduce highly insulin-secreting foods, but do not address the insulin resistance issue. Like I said, remember that a fat person or overweight person eating broccoli might produce the same amount of insulin as a thin person eating, one Skittle, right? Because of the insulin resistance that's built up, the tolerance that's built up. Weight is initially lost, but insulin resistance keeps insulin levels and body set weight high. That's why when you reduce your calories, you're going to lose that weight, but your body is still fighting to get your weight back up to that set weight point, because you've done nothing to change that insulin production and resistance in your body. Fasting is an efficient method of reducing insulin resistance. All right, I didn't know what to call this section, so it's just a random bits of fasting information. All right. Any questions yet? Any questions so far? Fairly clear? All right. Insulin diuresis. Insulin causes salt and water retention in the kidney or kidneys, and that everyone has water stored. Water weight. For the first 5 days, weight loss averages 0.9 kilograms a day, which far exceeds what you would expect for caloric restriction. And so a lot of that, what you're losing is water weight, because you're not eating, your insulin isn't there to cause water retention. So your body's like, all right, I've stored up all this water, I don't need it, so I'm going to, start flushing the system out. And this is what you see for almost all diets. They can say, if they're only testing the first few days, oh, this is a wonderful diet. When in reality, they're just losing water weight. And that's what they found with Atkins. These people would find tremendous weight loss at the beginning, but it was only because they were stopping eating the processed foods and substituting with high amount of protein, and they were going into diuresis, losing a lot of water weight, but then that stopped, and then they would start to eat more meat, and this caused a whole bunch of other problems. But regardless, you're going to find that in fasting as well. Your body's going to flush out the excess water that's been stored. Growth hormone. Human growth hormone is known to increase the availability and utility of fats for fuel. And so when that HGH increases in your body is more primed to burn fat as opposed to glucose. It starts reaching towards the bank, right, instead of your wallet. It also helps to preserve muscle mass and bone density. So HGH, this is why if you follow sports at all, HGH is a banned substance, right? Because by taking this hormone, you get more muscles, and you can perform better, I guess. But through fasting, HGH is produced naturally because your body kicks in to try to preserve its muscles and to preserve its bones. Growth hormone secretion decreases steadily with age. That's what they find. The older you get, the less growth hormone your body naturally produces. And so they've tried to treat some aging related diseases by with human growth hormone injections. But these injections come with a whole list of side effects, of negative side effects. But when your body produces it naturally, those negative side effects aren't there, I should say. So fasting is what really helps bump this up. One of the most potent stimuli to growth hormone secretion is fasting. Over a 5-day fasting period, growth hormone secretion more than doubled. And so this is why you find bodybuilders. You think, well, bodybuilders, athletes, they're not going to fast because they need the nutrients constantly. There's some that fast particularly intentionally because of that boost of growth hormone they get. Electrolytes. Concerns about malnutrition during fasting are misplaced. Insufficient calories are not a major worry since fat stores are quite ample. The main concern is the development of micronutrient deficiency. However, even prolonged studies of fasting have found no evidence of malnutrition. The one micronutrient that you might find, even on a relatively short 2-day fast is salt, electrolytes. And just by putting a little salt in your hand and taking that will really help out that little bit of micronutrient imbalance. For example, talking about people saying, oh, you're losing out all your nutrients, you can never survive. There's a man named Angus Barbieri. He was a Scot, and he has a record. He fasted for 382 days, over 1 year. All he took was water and vitamin supplements, because after that long, you do need the vitamins. In that year, he went from 456 pounds to 180 pounds. He lost 276 pounds. And guess what? He didn't gain it all back. He only gained 16 pounds of it back. Fasted for over a year, lost almost 300 pounds, and only gained 16 pounds of it back. So where did he get his nutrients from? Where did he get his nutrition from? From his fat storage. That's how our bodies are created. Hopefully, none of us ever need to get to that point, obviously. But they've shown. This guy proved it, that this is how the body works. Adrenaline. Adrenaline levels are increased so that we have plenty of energy to go get more food. I already mentioned that. 48 hours of fasting produces a 3.6 increase in metabolic rate, not the dreaded metabolic shutdown, right? So not eating ramps up your metabolism. It doesn't shove you down into starvation mode. They have that. This is pop science that has the real science completely backwards. In response to a 4-day fast, resting energy expenditure increased up to 14%. So that REE, just by sitting around, your body's going to be burning 14% more energy. So you'd have the energy, the ability to go out and get food. Human growth hormone, again, there's an early spike in the morning when you fast, and it actually is secreted throughout the day. A 5-fold increase after a 2-day fast. So after fasting 2 days, it's going to, 500% more human growth hormone. And fasting has the potential to unleash the anti-aging properties of HGH without any of the problems of excessive. When you get HGH injections, you have the potential for prostate cancer, increased blood pressure, increased blood sugar, but none of that happens if you produce that naturally. So there's benefits for athletes and for regular folk. Train harder, increased adrenaline, VO2, recover faster, build muscle faster, you burn fat, your insulin goes down. These are just some of the benefits from fasting. Fasting myths. We'll do this and they'll give you a couple minute break to shake the cobwebs out, and then we'll get to the heart of the issue here. So fasting puts you into starvation mode. I think we've seen that that's false. That myth is completely wrong. There is no such thing as starvation mode. Your body's not, you miss a meal, your body's not going to start putting all your calories towards fat the next meal next food you eat. Fasting will overwhelm you with hunger. That's not going to happen. Your body, you're going to be hungry the next time you start eating. Maybe we'll talk about this later, but fasting causes overeating when you resume feeding, which is false. Dr. Varaday from the Every Other Day diet says that once you start eating, after you've fasted for a day, the next meal you eat, they hypothesize that you would eat 200% of your calories. You had zero, say a 2,000 calorie diet, you had 0 calories one day, so you're going to compensate by having 4,000 calories the next day. They said in reality, they only ate 25% more. So they only ate, it was at 2,500 calories the next day, as opposed to 4,000. So yeah, you're going to eat a little bit more, but not nearly to compensate for the meals that you've missed. It's just a myth that you're going to overeat. Fasting will make you lose muscle. No, HGH stops. You're not going to lose muscle until you're down to 4% body fat, which you shouldn't be fasting anyways if you're down to 4% body fat. But that's when your body starts to metabolize the protein. So you're not going to lose muscle through fasting. Fasting deprives the body of nutrients. No, you've seen the guy fasted for over a year. He got his nutrients from his fat. Fasting causes hypoglycemia, lowered blood glucose. No, your body has other systems in place that keeps your blood glucose regulated. The brain needs glucose to function. No, because after fasting, we didn't talk about this, but your brain starts running off of ketones. Once the glucose that runs out, your body switches over to run off ketones. And it's just crazy, and that's just a myth because, as we've seen, there's a lot of good health benefits from fasting.